So to start with, I'm a firm believer, kind of to Marley's point, is that that volunteers are the secret sauce to any success. Whether you're a large festival, small festival, really to anything we do in general, right? Even in our community, whether it's a festival or event or gardening, whatever it is. Maybe we'll go to the next slide. I'm going to just tell you a little bit about me. So you may find this slide funny, but this here is representative of me. So I work for the City of Ottawa, as you can see. So I have my corporate suit on. And separate from that, I work for the City of Ottawa, but I live in a small town about an hour outside of Ottawa, west of Ottawa, called Perth. I don't know if anyone is familiar with that. And I chair a music festival there, and it's called Stewart Park Music Festival. And I'll talk about that in a second. But the reason I put this slide, and I continue to think I'm going to write a book on it, to be honest with you, because there's, I will say there's a difference when you're working in government than when you're working in the private sector, when you're trying to seek volunteers. And we'll go into that a bit. There's no negative. It's just I've noticed there's a difference. I've also noticed being in the private sector, running an event versus when you work for the municipality, which, as I say, I do, it's easy for me to call up and get something. Whereas when you're with the private sector, there's more challenges because you're trying to get, you don't have access like city staff do. So we'll go to the next slide, Emma, please. So this is the Stewart Park Festival that I chair, and this is a 3-day music festival by donation. I'm just going to give you, we had done, for years it was called a free 3-day music festival. And after COVID, of course, we were trying to get people back to the festival, and we weren't receiving any revenue because we start with zero at the beginning of the year, and we rely totally on grants. We rely on donations and sponsorship. And the reason for that is because Stewart Park, where the festival is held, you cannot ask, when that land was donated to the town, Mr. Stewart said there will be you can't sell anything in that park. So we do everything by donation. But what I will tell you is that this year, we changed the language to festival by donation, and we always had donation boxes at the entrances of the park. And we had them again this year, but what we did is we changed the language from 3-day free festival to a festival by donation. And our donations went up by $23,000. And that was simply the language. And what we did, Meg, you would get, like, from the marketing side, every time the artistic director would introduce an artist, or he was the MC basically all day, he kept saying, remember, this is a festival by donation in order to bring these artists in. And we get people like Matt Anderson, Natalie McMaster. We get really good talent. But just having that constantly in the messaging, we saw such a difference. I mean, I've been doing it for 5 years, the festival. So it's not like it was a brainchild and I'm here saying, oh, it did well this year because of me. That's not it at all. But we realized we have to start changing the messaging. So we get about 24,000 attendees. We have 120 volunteers, and I'll talk about that. And we have a committee of 12. So there's 12 of us that volunteer. None of us are paid. And then on top of that, we have 120 volunteers who are out every year for that weekend. Debbie's been at that festival, Deb? Like it's pretty robust, right? Yeah. And the reason I put this picture here is just a little tip that T-shirts are everything. Like you'll see the different color T-shirts. Every year we have one color, but this is an example of how folks treasure their volunteers. They love their T-shirts. They love them. And people, there's one man, if you see the man with the beige pants on, he's been volunteering for 30 years. He has all the T-shirts from the last 30 years. So that's a hint to to some extent, what's important to volunteers. It's just a nugget they can put away and look at it. It might have a date on it. And then they can look at it and just kind of store it away. So we'll go back, we'll go to the next slide. The other thing we do that our volunteers love is we have a framework set. So this here is the framework for this coming festival in 2025. And the key to this is we look at this here. The volunteers know their shifts. They know when the shuttle buses are coming around. Everything is contained within here. And we do that every year. So, say if Deb wanted to volunteer next year, she can look and say, oh, like we already know what our schedule is. And people, the 120 volunteers, what we hear from them is that they can sign up every year for the same shift. Maybe it's like a Saturday from noon till 3. They know what's happening then. So I would highly recommend that, whether it's your wine event, or whether it's the conservatory. It has so much value. It's consistency. And they look at it and they know when the artists are playing, as I say, when the shuttle bus, when the cash floats are coming out, because some of them are involved in cash. So this is key to us. I'll go to the next slide, Emily. This isn't even the full amount of folks. So the folks in the blue are us. And the only reason we do that is that people then, it's not because we're a committee, but it's so the volunteers know where we are, like the folks in the red that are only there for the weekend, they can see us in the crowd. And we used to have all the same color and we switched it 2 years ago. And the volunteers said they love it because they just look for the blue shirts and they know where we are close by. So that's just another little tip. This here, I will tell you, this picture was taken. So our festival goes from Friday to Sunday. It ends Sunday at 4 o'clock. Sunday at 4 o'clock, we then have a meal for the volunteers. And it's like we have a nice meal, and we have it in the area is called Crystal Palace. It's along the water there on the park site. And what happened was this picture was taken after probably 50 people had left by that point. But we thought, let's get the picture anyway, then we have it. So again, the different color t-shirts are very helpful for the volunteers. We'll go to the next one. So I think we all know what a volunteer is. I just thought I'd put this in here just simply so that we all understand we're talking about the same definition of a volunteer, right? It's a person who gives freely of their time and energy for public benefit. Interesting, I did some research and it's 2.5 million Canadians. So if you think of it, the population of Canada is like 40.2, I think, million. So look at those numbers for people volunteering, which is amazing. And we all know they have the same characteristics. Typically, they have passion for whatever it is they're volunteering for, whether, again, it's for the winery or whether it's for the conservatory. And they have drive and they have empathy. I'll go to the next slide. So this one is why recruitment is important. I can tell you with us at Stewart Park Festival, recruitment is ongoing. Although we have 120, we always continue. We're recruiting every year. So we just had, even on our committee, for example, we have a new person joining us next week on our committee. So the idea is that it's attracting and inviting people to consider involvement. That's the key. And then why we recruit. I put cost savings. Some people are shy about saying that, but that is the reality of it. And we never say the volunteer is working. We would just reference volunteer hours. Meg, you might, from working with the province, I know here at the city, we're very careful with language we use for volunteers. It's because they're not paid, right? So it's not a job. So we're sensitive to that. There's a community engagement, smoother operations, and it creates a positive atmosphere because people are doing something they love that they don't get a chance to do. So regardless if it's a festival or whatever, I go back to there was someone that was going to be on from the gardening group, and I think, well, like that, when I looked at that website, I was like, that's fantastic. People can learn everything from seed to planting to, releasing the plants and whatever. So there's opportunity. So here's just some tips for you is to identify your needs, create clear roles and descriptions. That is so critical because it avoids confusion. And I think we all know that often what happens, volunteers don't come back if they're not happy, if they haven't had strong leadership, if they weren't given clear direction, or got on site and weren't really sure what they were supposed to do. Volunteers love to volunteer typically, but they also don't like wasting their time, right? And they want to leverage the network, and we should be leveraging our network to get more volunteers. And then we simplify registration. So what we do, again, we at Stewart Park, we'll send out the end of March a call for volunteers. We'll get the same ones back, as I say, every year, but then we also ask for other ones, but it's an online process. It's easy peasy. If they are dealing with children or if they're dealing with cash, they have to have a police record check done. And because they're doing that, working with us, they don't have to pay for the police record check. So we make sure all of that is clear. If you go to our website, and if you want after this, I can send you our website. It's very clear in terms of what the process is. But again, one of the most important things is when they go to our site, they have that framework. So they can look at, they don't know what artists are playing. One thing that we've heard from volunteers is, oh, I would have volunteered Saturday night if I had known Natalie McMaster was playing, for example, right? But when you're putting on an event, you know that you don't get, a lot of times you don't have the artist until closer to the event, and because you're typically booking your artists as they're touring through your area. We offer incentives to the artists. I know, for example, Blues Fest up here, when they get volunteers in, the volunteers, if they do X number of hours for that week, they do a 10-day festival. The artist or the volunteer gets passes to their concerts. We don't because we're free. But I know Blues and I think Jazz Fest does that as well. The other is to communicate effectively. We have a volunteer coordinator who reaches out throughout the year as well, because we want to continue engagement with our volunteers. But it's clear communication in terms of expectations, a lot of praise. I'll get into some of that stuff. We provide training. What we do is the festival starts on a Friday. The Tuesday night before the festival, we do a training session with the volunteers, and we go over kind of what they can expect from us, what we can expect from them. We also do a training on the emergency plan. That is very important. So if there is an emergency, the volunteers are well aware what to expect during an emergency. And we show appreciation, as I said. I mean, that's a big thing for us, is even throughout the weekend, we show, I mean, they're busy, everyone's running, but we always make sure we take time and kind of have a team huddle. And it's 120 volunteers, you could be thinking, how the heck do you do that? But what we do it is at certain areas, like someone will go over one of the blue shirts, so to speak, and just gather those volunteers for 5 minutes to thank them. Then they go on and do their thing. And as I mentioned, the consistent schedule. You can go on, Emma. Here's some key steps. It's pretty much what I talked about already. It's define why someone would be motivated to volunteer. That there, Meg, as you know, that would be part of your marketing messaging, right? Like, why would you want to volunteer with us? And what is the interest and what options are available for the volunteer. And it's also important from an accessibility lens. So we've had people who have reached out to us to say, for example, they have mobility challenges. Like one lady was in a wheelchair and she said, I'd love to volunteer, but I don't know if I'd be able to because of being in a wheelchair. So we make accommodations because we want everyone. We're an inclusive festival, so we want to make sure there's opportunities. What I would say for us, where I think we need to improve, like the Stewart Park Festival, is we need to show visuals of that. A volunteer, like an actual, like I'm not a believer in just putting pictures up to put them up to say we're inclusive. We will have this lady, for example, next year we'll have pictures of her if she's open to it, which I think she will be based on the conversation, but just to show that we're all inclusive, literally, right? And your volunteers can help you with your recruitment if you're looking for, Marley, a lot of the times relying on your current volunteers to tap into their network. And it's also to get some testimonials. So for example, we'll do some feeds on social media and we'll have the volunteer either at the festival and we'll do a social post with them, talking about how much they like the festival. And a lot of times we'll do it afterwards. And that's part of our engagement throughout the year. And we just pop out a post to say, this is Dave, he's volunteered at our festival. We're 6 months away from the next one, stuff like that. So those things are good. And identifying where to recruit new volunteers, I would leverage your community. Like I don't know if there's other festivals in your town or the conservatories, for example. Like I read, Marley, on yours, like you have researchers there as well, I believe, at the conservatory. So I would think you probably have an opportunity with those researchers to reach out to other researchers, like, hey, come and be a part of it, see if you like this, those types of things. I'll go next, Emma. So what I would like to know, this is kind of the discussion point, and then we'll continue on, but how do you recruit your volunteers? So Meg, maybe I'll start with you. I know you're marketing, but it seems to me you're like from a marketing side, I guess, right?
hmm Yeah. So some of our volunteers are our board of directors are actually all volunteer based. So one way that we recruit them is I actually had one of our board members get like have a video where I talked to her and I asked her, why are you on our board? What's in it for you? Sort of thing. So like you were talking about earlier, where we're talking about why people might want to participate. We do our recruiting through social media to share like real people who are doing it and like who they might work with too. Because I do sort of think that if people see volunteers who are fun, they might want to volunteer to hang out with them, was
That's
my
right.
thought. And the board of director member, she's super fun. So
Oh,
that's why.
that's good. Yeah, and on that note, so like I listen to a lot of podcasts, right? And then I look at research that's being done, and the research, one of the things I was reading is that this was the I'll call it the biggest year for people buying earphones. And it's because people are more into audio, right, versus reading, obviously. I think we all know that. But so we're tapping into that too. Like that's why we want like a social post. We want some video out there. And we call it our story. And which and then people tap into that. And okay, thanks, Bobby Joe. What about you?
At the winery, it's been more like family and friends who have been helping and just word of mouth because we are a small community. But we're also finding that there's challenges with family and friends as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's why I need to learn a little bit more about it.
Do you have like restaurants in your town that like that are serving your wine, or do they have like ladies' night or stuff like that that you could?
Yeah, we have our licensees, our local licensees for sure.
Because one of the things that's been done that has been proven to be successful, and it hasn't like we haven't done it, but I will tell you, I just came back. I was teaching in West Virginia. So Dave mentioned I teach at the International Event Management School. It's called IFEA, an Executive Management School. Anyway, one of the things one of the students did is, and the students are all different ages, right? But they were telling me a story how they did just place cards, like just a little place card, and they put a QR code and it says scan me. And then when you scan it, so what they did is they raised the curiosity. And when you scan it, it's information on a place that needs volunteers. So
Okay.
like for you, I could see a picture of your brew or your winery, sorry. And then you have the small, just if you could work with the restaurants or anywhere in the shops and put it on. And they were saying that the curiosity of people, because they didn't know for sure what it was when it said scan me. And then it was stuff about volunteer, come join us, come volunteer. Here's what we offer. So just a thought there.
Yeah, like we offer, like I feel like it's a pretty good gig. Like they all have their t-shirts. They get into the concert for free, obviously.
Yeah.
We've had some pretty good names, and then they get a meal voucher and they get a glass of wine. So we've like been offering that,
That's,
and it's been good. But now we're finding like now they instead of just a regular glass of wine, they want a premium glass of wine, and they want like it's just that's what we're running into is that people are just like, well, if I volunteered at this concert, I would like tickets for this one. Like I guess
oh.
more of the greediness of it. So
Maybe part of that, just a thought is when you're recruiting them, like either on your recruitment page or whatever, you could have, here's your reward or whatever, so that it's written down so to
okay.
set the expectation. Just a thought.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, well, you're welcome, David. And the other thing, you know what else that you might be another thing for you is also if you have influencers. Right? So if you look at so an influencer will typically, like we use them here at the City of Ottawa, and a lot of the festivals use them. But when you're looking for, I'm sorry, I'm moving back because the sun's in my either. When you're looking for an influencer, what you want to do, the key is to look at, obviously you want someone who's in the same headspace in terms of, volunteering at a winery with concerts, whatever. But look at the number of people following them. That's your first key to hiring an influencer. And you can get some, like we've had them, we have a lot of languages here in Ottawa. We have like 90 different languages spoken with our residents. So sometimes we might hire a Spanish influencer or whatever if we're trying to get a message out. And for festivals, they do hire them. They wouldn't be as much. When we hire them, it's $1,000 for the day. But we have them for the whole day. For you, you might just want an hour or two with them.
Okay.
But influencers do well because they're on social media and they get the message out. Like, hey, come, like make sure they're wearing one of your volunteer t-shirts though.
Okay.
Yeah. Dave, were you going to say something?
Dolores, I just jumped on, just sort of tagging on with something you said. One place I've gone in the past to get volunteers is multicultural centers for, people, new immigrants that want connections in the community. Like
Yeah,
you said, that they can help with a vibrant community and bring different skills and different audiences to your festival as well.
that's
Um,
true.
you know,
Yeah,
so
that's
that's
so
a good
true.
place. The other place, and again, you have to be careful and you have to have the right fit. It's not for everyone and everywhere, but places like the John Howard Society, where people coming back into the community that are required to get community service hours. So you're not going to put them on front lines with cash and kids and stuff like that. But if you're keeping your grounds clean and you're helping in parking lots and the such, they've always got people that have hours and that need to be filled and people that are willing to work. So just two
That's a
areas
good
to
point.
think about that are sort of out of the box and not thought about a lot.
Yeah, yeah, like and you're bang on too with the multicultural communities. We call them priority neighborhoods here. And we tap into those communities a lot and they love it. Like they want to, like we put a group of well, I think they were not like 19 to 22 years old together to promote an event, but we needed diversity, right? And we're very upfront with them, right? Like we had one lady who said, I don't want to be in a picture because of my look. And we totally respect that. But we did find some, like one of the gentlemen that worked at the community center, he's like, I have a group here that would love to have photos. So what we did is we went out, we got we met with them, we had pizza, we had the photographer there. And then when we got the pictures that we were able to use for social media and whatnot, we did a nice group picture and we put that group picture in the community center and they love it because when they go in there, their family can see them on there. Like it's just little ways to engage people, right? So yeah, that helps. Marley, how do you recruit?
One of well, first of all, the Architecture Conservancy Ontario has a kind of head office with a board, which I'm part of, and that's kind of works out of Toronto. But then we have 15 different branches across Ontario, and each of those branches deals with issues in their own community. So there are different and most of those people are volunteers. One of our main issues is finding younger people to become involved, particularly because we value the way they are tech savvy, which is something that we need. But we find that volunteers who actually have a day job, that we need to work around their day job.
Yeah. What about the students that have to do their 40 hours? Like they're quite tech savvy, the young students.
They,
It wouldn't work for Bobby Joe, but for you it might. Just
not really, because yeah, we do have work shadowing opportunities for students, but they're mostly older students. They're university students rather than high school students.
Oh, okay. Um, the other, of course, is family volunteering, right? People are always looking for opportunities to do something with their kids on a Saturday.
Mhm.
That's free and it shows meaning, giving back to the
Yeah,
community, the family, and
well, certainly with doors open, for example, the Windsor Essex, Tammy's finalizing that, and she has a ton of volunteers. They've got 60 venues this
oh
year.
wow, yeah, wow, that's really good.
So yeah, she does an amazing job.
And like you could market that as well. You know, I'm not going to say the proper language right now because like like from a marketing side, I need to think about it. But what I want to say is something along the lines like, a grandmother and grandchild come like there's opportunities there to
Cross
do.
generational.
Yeah, that's what it, cross-generational, like volunteering and really promote that. You know what, Bobby Joe, I was thinking with you is because with the wineries, how you'd want to promote it too is like you know how you give them a t-shirt, but if they had a toque and it just had the name of your wine company, it is also a way to market your company when they're not there volunteering.
I'd like to share another thing that happened
Sure.
last night. Our local town, Ridgetown, is 150 years old this year. And so we did a call out to people in the community asking for ideas about ways to celebrate the 150 years. Now the organizing community, have been working on this for a year, but we wanted extra input. And one of the people who came, who isn't associated with any of the local service clubs or anything, is new to the community. And she's young. I mean, she looks about maybe 30 and has a great background. And she volunteered to be the volunteer coordinator as a way to get to know other people in her community. And we're just delighted. I mean, that
So,
fills a huge hole in
oh, for sure.
our group. So
You know,
looking for newcomers and
is,
and
yeah.
emphasizing that this is a way for them to get embedded into the community quickly is a great way to draw in some new fresh volunteers.
Absolutely. And you know what, on that point, when I moved to Perth, so I lived, like I'm from Cape Breton, but lived in Ottawa for 20 some years. And then we moved out to Perth, which is a heritage town. Um, so I wanted to get involved in the community because on the weekends I wasn't coming back into Ottawa. And to your point, Marley, I saw an ad in the local paper that the festival was looking for a chair. And my job as manager of events with the city, I mean, I've done all that, right? Like, so I was like, oh, and then I was like, no, maybe I want to try something different. But then I thought this is perfect way for me to get involved in the community. So I got involved. They interviewed me. And it was great. I mean, I know so many people in the town of Perth. Population is 6,000, by the way. But but I
And
love it.
Dolores, if I can jump into that point, I mean, sometimes, as event organizers, we try to pigeonhole people into volunteer pegs too. Like, for example, Meg, you spend your day doing marketing and communications, and, I've got a hole for somebody at marketing communications. You might not want to, that might not want to be what you want to do in your free time. You might want to add more tools to your toolbox doing something else. But what I always say is, in the back of your mind that you've got that person with that skill set in your volunteer base. So when it comes to strategic planning, or you've got a crisis and need some expertise in communication management, that person is still in your volunteer base. So it's important not to pigeonhole
That's
and
right.
try to fit people in there so that they, when necessary, they're there and you can use the skills that are available to you.
It's
The other one
true.
I was going to talk to you about is Terry Voigt at Oktoberfest at the 50th anniversary. To that cross generational point, he did a thing on 50 years of volunteers, and we had some volunteers that had been with the festivals for 50 years. We had 40 years, 30 years,
Oh,
20 years,
yeah,
10 years, 5 years, and each of them volunteered for a different reason. So I mean, you're not going to put a 50-year-old volunteer running your database, right? So
that's
you've got
right.
to
Yeah.
know what it is they're interested, and they're all interested in getting something out. So that person is probably your great meter and greeter at the door and knows where everything is and knows the routes through. And so,
Yeah.
finding those fits is so important.
It's so important. And that's where I tie it back to accessibility. Because there are people that aren't attending things because they think that the place isn't accessible, right? And that's why it's important to have it in your language as well, that your site, your place is accessible, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, so that's good. This is all great stuff. So I think I'm just looking at the time. Maybe we'll go on if unless anyone else has any questions. We're good. So here's another thing is that municipalities engage volunteer communities. So this here picture that I have here, it's an older picture, but it's a good example of, do you guys know the Ottawa Senators? You
Yeah.
guys are probably all Leaf fans, are you? Yeah. So, but this was a few years ago. The Ottawa Senators made it into the playoffs, the hockey playoffs. Um, and what happened was there was a gentleman, I got a call from Ottawa Police saying, heads up, there's someone on Facebook telling people to go to Elgin Street. That's the core downtown. And we couldn't stop him legally from going on Facebook, but he was driving people down to Elgin Street. And of course, the concern is the congestion downtown, right? So we had like I got a call 3 in the afternoon. We were straight out for the next 2 weeks. But my point to this is municipalities often will engage. They'll do a reach out to say, if you have any volunteers, because we needed help ASAP, right? And so we reached out to different community groups to ask them to help us if they could have their volunteers engage with us. And then whoever the lead was for that community, say, like, so for example, Bobby Joe or Marley, whoever, then you work with the city, which they later told us it was a really great experience. But I'll tell you this, so this was 2 weeks. So we'd be downtown in Ottawa at 7 in the morning and getting home. I was getting home at 1 in the morning, and I'm a big Sens fan, but I got to tell you, by the end, that second week, I just wanted them to lose. I think we all felt that way. It was like, this has got to stop, because we had 80,000 people on the streets. And we had the police, we had snipers up on the hotel roof. It was beyond. So I just wanted to share that because it's also good to connect with your municipality. And sometimes what's good about that is that, like, so say if you went to the volunteer office at the city and you say to them, hey, you know what? I'm Bobby Joe. I have a winery. We have some volunteers, or Marley, whoever. But there might be a way for us to connect and help should something arise, or connect our volunteers. And you can also ask the municipality if they can reach out to their volunteers. Like, we have a data bank of 4,000. Like, we couldn't give you their contact information. I'm sure you guys all know that stuff. But what we can do is send a message out, say, hey, if you're interested in volunteering in this, whatever, our thing, it has to be like a not-for-profit, or if it's helping a cause within a community, we can send we can send a message out, and very often they'll get volunteers from we give the volunteers your link, and then they tap into it. So just a thought there. So here's some effective, kind of what we talked about already, effective recruitment strategies. I won't go line by line by this, but it's there for you. What I'd like to know is, what do you find to be your most effective? Like, I know you mentioned a bit of it, but of all the recruitment you've done, what's your most effective tool?
I can speak to the perspective of being a volunteer. I find so my husband, and sometimes I get roped into it too, but he's more the volunteer. He goes and takes care of a local skating rink near our house. And for him, he just loves to see people using it. So I think like a big motivation for volunteers is getting to have that joy of giving back to the community. So and then I help him because I like to spend time with him. So I think there's a lot of social and like and that's something you touched on earlier as well. There's a lot of social benefits, and I think that highlighting that in your communications for volunteers is always going to be a benefit. And making sure that when people do join as volunteers, they feel really welcomed and part of the community early. And I think that that's something that my husband Jake's really enjoyed about helping with the skating rink. And then also he loves to skate, so it's kind of win-win.
Do you know what? I should send you, like, do you have, like, here we have community rinks that are run by volunteers. Is that what you have?
Yeah.
So we did, we went out and we did, so we had, like, I have two videographers on my team here. And so we went out and we did a story on a gentleman who, I think it's over 40 years he's been working at the community rink. And because we were a bit challenged, because we were having a hard time because two of the rinks we didn't have volunteers. So we did this story, because our thing is all about telling stories, right? Kind of to what you're saying, Meg. And we sent that video out. You can't even believe the hits it got. And then people sending messages to us saying, hey, I live in that community where we didn't have someone. If you need me, I wasn't even aware of that. So, like, shame on us, because clearly our messaging wasn't good from a marketing side, right? But the video made such a difference. So if you ever want to see it, I can send that to you as well. Just a thought. What about you, Bobby Joe? What's your key? If you had one strategy that worked, what would it be?
Well, right now it's just been word of mouth for us, which has been really great, but we also feel like we also don't want them to feel like they have to volunteer.
Yeah.
How about you, Marley? If you had one thing to pick, what would it be?
It's pretty much word of mouth. The other thing is with the Architecture Conservancy Ontario, we have a monthly report that goes out called Acorn in a Nutshell. And that highlights issues that we have, needs that we have for volunteers, events that are taking place, and a large section with links to things that are going on that people can follow if they want. So
That's
a
good.
regular email and word of mouth.
Yeah, one of the things I had in my notes here, it kind of what you're saying, Marley, is and I'm thinking for you, Bobby Joe, like, do you do a newsletter? And so in your newsletter, you may want to put a link for volunteering, like a volunteer link there. And I would do a testimonial and put that in your newsletter. And then kind of introduce the link to volunteering. And then your next newsletter, you could do a testimonial, but you won't need to. Just continue to have the link there, but have it so that it's prominent, right? At the end of the newsletter, have it there. Or you can have it at usually the front or the end, but not in the middle because it gets lost when people are reading.
The other thing that with that I'd like to emphasize is that we keep asking people not to assume that everybody is on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever social media. I don't have time for social media. So if somebody doesn't send me an email, I don't find out that things are happening.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then from a municipal lens as well, more so for the not-for-profit, the ward counselors, you could ask them they have newsletters like Bobby Joe, like I don't know even if you're not a not-for-profit, but you're a business within the ward counselors area, you could ask them to put something in their newsletter. Most that I'm aware of counselors do like a monthly or bi-monthly newsletter. I know, like I've suggested that. I mean, not that I'm sure other people had that idea too, but it's worked effectively. So just a thought there. You're going to see here when I talk about learning, learn and serve. That's some language where if you want to use it to get your volunteers, and that kind of speaks to like family volunteer. It speaks to anything, but if you look at like family volunteering, parents who want their children to learn about giving back, or it could be cooking at the food shelter, anything like that. So learn to serve is good language to use to kind of market the volunteer program. So I put here risk mitigation, and the reason I put this here is because if you want a smooth, like it's basically, a smooth process with your volunteers. So the thing about like policies and procedures handbook, they should have that. I've seen where people say, well, they're the volunteer. Really, it's just the committee that should have it. No, they should have this as well. They should have assigned descriptions. The application should be an easy process. You want to do background checks. If there's money or children involved, they really should have a police record check. And that is for liability. Like you may have insurance, but if something happens, it reduces your liability. But if something did happen, even if you had insurance, at least you can say, I did a background check on the person. And then point of acceptance in terms of you want to make sure it's a proper match, that the person has an interest. The last thing you want is a volunteer volunteering for your area just to say they volunteered when they're not a good match. For the other people volunteering, that it would be a negative to them. And you want to make sure you have the emergency contact information for the volunteers, which typically is part of the application process. But separate from that, for your event, you should have like a card or whatever that has all your volunteers and their emergency contacts. That way, if something were to happen, you don't have to scramble back to the application. You have that there, the list of contacts. And they want them to be trained, as I mentioned. We do train them on the emergency plan, what their role would be, given like where they're volunteering. If an emergency happens, here's how it would affect you, and here's what your process would be. So that's so important for volunteers. We'll go on to the next slide. I know we have 5 minutes, so I'll rush this along a bit. Sorry. So this is retention. I just put some things here and I thought we'd have a chat about how do you retain your volunteers? Can I just go across and everyone give one way in what they do to make sure they retain their volunteers? Meg, can I start with you? I'm always going left to right.
Mhm. Yeah, I would say just making sure that the expectations are very clear so that they know what they're signing up for and they are happy to sign up for that instead of kind of like the bait and switch.
Yeah, and that does happen. Bobby Joe?
Again, so I do like all the events. Abby does all our volunteers. She's just on mat leave right now, so I'm not sure what she's done. They all come back every year.
It's for the wine. No, I'm sure it's a positive environment, or they know Dave's going to be there.
Yeah.
No, thanks, Bobby Joe. Marley?
I'd say communication, both ways, us to the volunteers to us, because often the volunteers know better than we do what's needed and what's going to keep them happy.
And to that point, you'll see in the list here that I have include volunteer, where I talk about the schedules, that the schedule supports their personal needs. So often if a volunteer says, I can't volunteer at 4 o'clock on Friday, but I can 6, you can't get upset with them. At the end of the day, they're here to help us. You just have to go with whatever works for them. We'll go to the next slide. We have an emergency volunteer program here at the city that I started. And so if you don't have one within your municipality, it does have a lot of value. So what we do is we train the volunteers. We had the emergency group come in and train a number of volunteers. I think we had 60. We provided clothing for them, and that way, if there is an emergency in the city, so say if there was a fire and they had to evacuate a hotel or an apartment building, we could go out to these 60 volunteers. We have paramedics and police and whatnot, but sometimes it's just people to help run the reception center. These folks are trained. And so, for example, going back to what I said, if somebody's looking for a volunteer, or if we get a call from a counselor saying, hey, like, how can we tap into the volunteers? We can reach out to that group of 60 and say, you guys interested in volunteering somewhere else? But that emergency volunteer program has been very successful in last minute needs of the city. So I put that there in case there was anyone from municipal government on there. I just thought I should put it just to help them. Okay, and I think we're, okay, if we have a minute for this, what I was interested in, what's been your greatest challenge related to your volunteer program or a volunteer? And I say that because sometimes we have challenges with a volunteer, and then how did you overcome it? And the reason I wanted to talk about it was really lessons learned, how we could learn from each other. So maybe I'll start with Marley now, Megan, because I was always I'll go the other way. Marley? But what's been your greatest challenge related to one of either the volunteer program or a volunteer?
I guess one of my mantras is if you don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah.
And as my example last night, we were busy looking at all the people that we knew for a big job, and someone we didn't know appeared and is taking it on.
Yeah.
So, our message last night to everyone who came was, please share what you're doing and offer to help. And lo and behold, she did. So you don't ask, you don't get.
That's true. Yep. Okay, we're going to go on to the next. We're just about done. I think we are done. We have one more slide after this, but oversight, how do you check in with your volunteers? I think we probably heard that. I don't know if you guys want to talk about that. I don't know about timing, and how do you deal with no-shows?